This is Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. Hope you enjoy this critical thought, your daily discussion on game design. And be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and you can pitch future critical thought topics. Alright, before we get going with today's critical thought, if you haven't seen it yet, there's going to be a new video series coming to the YouTube channel and Game Wisdom's content in the form of Dissecting Design. Videos that will specifically break down mechanics and game elements of specific titles. You can watch the primer of it on the Game Wisdom YouTube channel now, and let me know what you think about it. For today's critical thought, we're going to be turning to the topic of indirect versus direct competition, and how it relates to the video game industry, and what it means to sell games in the market. For those of you who aren't game developers or members of the industry, today's critical thought may not be all that interesting to you, but if you're interested in getting into things, this is one of the more, understated elements of what makes the game industry different from other mediums. Now, parts of this critical thought are based on the topic we talked about in terms of the mobile market and how it related to the MMO crash from, I think it was a few days ago, maybe even last week. But what makes things interesting about game development and selling games has to do with the differences between direct and indirect competition. Direct competition is essentially when two services or products or whatever are competing with each other essentially to take the market. So this would be anything from like Pizza Hut versus Domino's, NBC versus CBS, Pepsi versus Coke. I think that's a good one. Basically, if you're a consumer of one product, you're not going to be the consumer of the other product. And direct competition is pretty much about trying to either oversell or, for many companies, ideally, put the other one out of business. And when I was working at Comcast, I still remember the first speech that I heard from the CEO when I got hired. He talked to all new employees, and they mentioned about how excited they were about all these other companies around them either folding into Comcast or going out of business and people losing their jobs. I know, very humanitarian there. And unfortunately, that's what direct competition is. And this is why there's all this talk about avoiding monopolies. Because as we all know, monopoly is when one company has complete and utter control over the market. And we saw pieces of that early in the game industry's lifespan with the beginning years of Nintendo. Maybe one of these days we should spend some time actually talking about that, because it is very interesting to contrast and compare Nintendo of the late 80s, 90s to where we're at today. But the point is, monopolies are not good for the consumers, because if there's only one place to get a product, it means they have free reign to do whatever they want, because who are you going to go to? And from a product point of view, this is why there's been talks, and I think there's been laws and acts put into place to avoid monopolies. This also is meant to avoid people or companies trying to work together to corner the market or to capitalize on it compared to everyone else. But that leads into a greater talk of economics, and definitely out of my wheelhouse, and also beyond the scope of today's critical thought. When it comes to the video game industry, this is the difference between clones of games and titles that are either spiritual successors or homages. When we talk about clones, these are games that are essentially trying to directly compete with each other. Angry Birds, Flappy Bird, anything that we really see in the mobile market, and as we talked about last week in terms of MMO designs. When everyone saw World of Warcraft was the big hot new darling, a lot of developers wanted to get in on that. Just as when Call of Duty lit things up, we saw more first-person shooters. Grand Theft Auto, the open world genre, Mario, platformers, and so on. And at least one of the good things about many developers is that they try to do at least something different. Like I just said with Mario, yes, Mario definitely set the foundation, the blueprint for platformer design from the late 80s through the mid-90s. But it wasn't a case of everyone just saying, we're going to just straight up copy Mario. We saw everyone try and do something a little bit different, be it games like Mega Man, the Mickey Mouse platformers, Plock. Yes, I just pulled out Plock for anyone who actually remembers that game. Battletoads, Double Dragon, G.I. Joe, Ninja Gaiden, and again, we could spend 10 minutes naming all these titles. Well, the point is, while all these games, you could see the DNA of Mario in terms of the platformer mechanics, controls, stuff like that, they all took things in different directions. And this is where the concept of indirect competition comes into play when it comes to the video game industry. As we've seen from the independent market, there are a lot of games being released. And while we've seen games from different genres, visual novel, platformer, simulation, clicker game, and so on, these games try to do enough things different so that they're not directly competing with each other. A very big case in point of this would be, of course, the ever popular debate of Battlefield versus Call of Duty. They may both be the big names of the first-person shooter and AAA market, but obviously anyone who's played these titles will tell you that they're different in terms of their design implementation. And this is really good for the game industry, because it prevents one game from being considered the de facto representation of what a video game is. Despite what outsiders and media sites will tell you, there isn't one thing that defines a video game. I mean, hell, we've spent a critical thought talking about what is a gamer, and I'm sure we're still not done with that. But the point is, when it comes to the video game market, just because I buy Final Fantasy doesn't mean that Shin Megami Tensei is not a game that I want to play, or Dragon Quest, or Call of Duty, Borderlands, etc. Just because I play one game doesn't immediately rule out the other games, even if they're from the same genre. I mean, hell, we start talking about the differences between the RPG genre and all of its games, we'll be here probably until I have to record tonight's Game Wisdom live. And what makes this an important point, and why it is a big deal for the video game industry, is that it promotes healthy competition. While developers are still competing with each other for your money, they're not competing with each other in terms of design. The car industry would be the counterexample. There is a basic foundation of what a car is. We have 4 wheels, steering wheel. You're driving from point A to point B. Everything else has to do with the style of the car, the features, and stuff like that. But again, when it comes to cars, for most people, you're not going to buy, again, I'm going to show my lack of knowledge when it comes to cars, you're not going to buy a Ford truck, and then decide, you know what, I kind of like the Toyota trucks. Honestly, as a bit of an aside, I'm not even sure if Toyota makes trucks. There's my knowledge of the car industry. But the point is, unless you're a collector or like a mechanic or someone who's going to buy and sell cars, typically you're going to buy one car, maybe like 2 cars if it's a family, and that's it. You're not going to be buying 3 or 4 cars a year, or heaven forbid, buy like 5 cars a month. When it comes to the video game industry, however, we're given a lot more leeway. I mean, hell, I don't even want to think of how many games I just bought over the last 2 months considering the Steam and holiday sales. And why this is a big deal when it comes to designing games is that you still have to pay attention to the market in terms of what genres are being put out and what games are being released. But this isn't a case of saying if I make a platformer that my platformer will have to coincide with the other platformers of the market, essentially. You do have to be careful not to release games similar on the same day or within the same time span. But if I make a first-person shooter, as long as I'm not just directly copying and pasting Doom, I can at least be assured that first-person shooter fans of the genre will play my game, or at least take a look at it. Now, of course, with that said, I don't want to release my first-person shooter the same week that Mass Effect comes out, or Madden, or Grand Theft Auto or anything like that, because they will still overshadow it. Even though they're not directly competing with me, it's still competing with the consumer's time and money. And we'll wrap things up today. This is going to be a quicker thought just because my voice is actually starting to die on me and we have tonight's Game Wisdom Live to record. When it comes to competing with the various parts of the game industry, it's still important to measure or review the market in terms of when you're going to put out a game and what's considered popular or not. Even though developers aren't directly competing with each other, these genres in a sense are. If 5 developers put out first-person shooters the first week of February, for instance, then I probably don't want to put out my smaller first-person shooter during that time. Maybe in a month or so, when all those first-person shooters have already came and went, and maybe people are looking for something new. But unless, like I said, unless you are directly trying to copy someone else's design, video games aren't going to be competing directly with each other. And for those of you watching this, I guess my question for you is, actually this will be for the developers out there, have there been cases as you've been releasing games or developing them that you've kept a close eye on the market in terms of altering your design to either fit or do something different, or in terms of actually putting your game out for sale? Have you had to make that choice between, do I put it out now and risk competing with someone else, or do I delay it at the expense of my fans and say, we're going to release it in 1 month when we know there's nothing else out at that time? Let me know in the comments below. And one last point, as you know, we have been updating the Patreon campaign. There are new goals and rewards. I want to ask you guys, would you be interested in a Patreon reward to have essentially a guest talk or a guest person here for these critical thoughts? It will be basically a one-on-one, or I guess 2 people discussing a topic. And I'm not going to make this like a super expensive goal. This won't be, give me $500 and you'll be able to talk with me for 10 minutes. It would be definitely on the cheap side. But let me know what you think in the comments below about that. But otherwise, we'll end things here. Thank you again for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe and pitch your own critical thoughts if you have a topic. Once again, I'm Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com, where we examine the art and science of games. Be sure to check out Game Wisdom Live tonight on Twitch and the upcoming Digesting Design video series. But until then, have a great night. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and of course share with your friends. It always helps out. For daily posts on all manner of game design and industry topics, check out game-wisdom.com. To support the site and everything that I do, be sure to check out the Patreon campaign. If we can hit goals, it will mean more content for everyone to enjoy, and I'll be able to support myself and my household. If you want to follow me, you can find me on Twitter at GWBycer for updates throughout the day and random thoughts from me. And lastly, you can find me on Twitch right over there at GWBycer for daily streams most nights around 10 Eastern. Thanks again for watching the video, and be sure to check out more great content coming to the Game Wisdom channel real soon.